Friday, so once again, it's time for Weekly North News, and unfortunately, I'm slowly starting to realize that starting a weekly news series at the beginning of the off-season was a pretty bad idea. So this week, we're going to change things up a little bit. We're going to do the formula a little different. Instead of selecting a headline for each team, 4 total stories, we're just going to do one large national story and how it impacts the NFC North division as a whole and what this means going forward for the Chicago Bears in particular and the Minnesota Vikings. So we're using the trick where we take a national story, find the local angle, do the tie-in to bring this into our realm, our corner of the NFL, and sort of have a fun discussion about recent national big-time news. And that is, of course, as you can tell by the thumbnail, or not the thumbnail, but the title anyway, the Carson Wentz trade. So the Philadelphia Eagles yesterday traded Carson Wentz to the Indianapolis Colts in exchange for a third-round pick and a conditional second-round pick that could turn into a first-round pick next year if Carson Wentz plays, I believe, over 75% of the snaps for the Indianapolis Colts. That is the deal. The Eagles take on a ton of dead money. I believe it's $33 million in dead cap space, or 1/6 of their total salary cap allotment, which is going to cripple them for this year at least, and probably start a domino effect of them having to make difficult decisions about veterans on the roster because their Super Bowl window is effectively closed in terms of being competitive and being in the hunt for deep playoff runs. But the Eagles and the Colts are, of course, not in the NFC North. So how does this affect what we do here? So first things first, and I'll put the tweet up on the screen if I can find it, is that the Chicago Bears reportedly backed out of this trade prior to the Colts and the Eagles finalizing their deal. And that strikes me as interesting because all of the rumors and speculation up to a certain point were that the Bears, or at least it sounded like the Bears, were offering more draft capital in exchange for Carson Wentz. Now, of course, Carson Wentz, I believe, in my opinion, would be an upgrade over Mitchell Trubisky and Nick Foles. It would sort of give them a bridge starter to finding a future franchise quarterback because, what Carson Wentz has left and can he be redeemed is a whole nother discussion. But I think that this actually saves the Bears. I think the winner of this trade is Chicago because they didn't sacrifice a first-round pick to acquire him. Ever since the Khalil Mack trade, they haven't been picking in the first round very frequently. So I think this is good for the Chicago Bears. Do they get the quarterback that is an upgrade over what they currently have? No, they don't. But do they save themselves the headache of potentially overpaying for a trade for Carson Wentz? Yes, I think so. I think the deal that the Colts made is pretty good. I think they're going to end up, sacrificing that first overall pick. I think that 2 turns into a 1 just by default because this team is good enough and competitive enough to sort of get back to the playoffs if Carson Wentz really is the player that we saw during that MVP run that he had before he got injured. So that is sort of my take on the Bears situation. What this also does for Chicago and the rest of the division is that this keeps them open to the quarterback market, right? So the potential for DeShaun Watson, who is the prized possession of the NFL quarterback carousel this offseason, still exists. We are now in a timeline where the Bears still have an opportunity, however small it may be, to acquire the services of DeShaun Watson if the Houston Texans are willing to trade him. We also have the rumors that Russell Wilson is unhappy with the current atmosphere in Seattle. We still have the possibility that Jimmy Garoppolo will be on the move. Cam Newton, Teddy Bridgewater. We don't really know what's going to happen with the Saints quarterback situation. Drew Brees, will he retire? Is Jameis Winston going to be available? We got a long way to go. This is an absolute marathon and not a sprint. Now, having said all that, if DeShaun Watson is able to be had by the Chicago Bears, I believe that is bad news for us. So the Bears really are the winner of the Wentz trade because it keeps Wentz out of Chicago. It keeps them with their draft capital, at least for now. And it allows them to remain in the market for DeShaun Watson, whether or not Houston wants to admit that they are willing to trade him, because I believe that everybody except Patrick Mahomes is tradable. So what does that mean for the rest of the division? Well, I mean, if DeShaun Watson suddenly appears in the NFC North for your opponent / division rival, that's not good. We don't want DeShaun Watson in Chicago. We should be thrilled that the Chicago Bears made the hindsight mistake of drafting Mitchell Trubisky second overall ahead of Patrick Mahomes and DeShaun Watson and whoever else might have been available at that time. And that's good news for us. When the Bears are bad and they have a bad quarterback, that's good news for us. That's good news for the Packers. That's good news for the Lions. It's bad news for the Bears, but that's their own problem. So if DeShaun Watson winds up in Chicago, you can sort of see how that is going to flip on its head, and suddenly we have to deal with DeShaun Watson and Aaron Rodgers in this division. So that is it'd be 4 games a year going up against all-pro MVP caliber talent at the most important position in the sport. So we don't want that. What does this mean for the Minnesota Vikings? Not much, other than the fact that I think the trade sort of resets expectations in terms of market value for quarterbacks that can be traded this year. Teams will absolutely pay and trade whatever they believe is fair value for a player, and maybe even more so if they really like and want a guy. So, but I do think that, this sort of calms down the talks of potentially getting 2 first-round picks in exchange for quarterbacks. Like, the quarterback market isn't as rich as we thought it was, because people missed the context of the Matthew Stafford trade, thinking that 2 first-round picks for Matthew Stafford was what it was, and not Matthew Stafford plus Jared Goff's ridiculous contract. So there's been rumors circulating lately about the Broncos looking to trade for an established / high-tier quarterback. Kirk Cousins fits that, and all the Kirk Cousins stands that disagree with me, that's going to be hard to disagree. Kirk Cousins is good. That's why people want him. George Payton, I believe I'm saying that name right, former assistant GM to Rick Spielman, is now the GM for the Denver Broncos. Maybe he could be looking to make a big-time splash, trade the 8th overall pick, which is, I believe, what Denver has. Or maybe it's the 9th or 10th, I forget at this moment. And, sort of give the Vikings 2 first-round picks for Kirk Cousins before he gets all his fully guaranteed money on the 3rd calendar day of the new league year. And that's really what the discussion is about going forward. It's not that Kirk Cousins is bad. It's not that we don't like him. It's just that the contract going forward is a bad situation. So what this does for the Vikings, in summary, is, it keeps the market in a position where teams aren't going to be turned off by the fact that maybe they have to surrender 2 first-round picks for an established quarterback. Not that Carson Wentz is an established quarterback anymore, but there is the potential to sort of fill in what you might have had to pay a couple of days after the Stafford-Goff trade, to turning your draft picks from like, hey, we're going to give you a first round, to, well, we'll give you a conditional, and if some measurements are met, then it'll be a first round pick. So that is all to be kept, with an open mind. So that is where we stand as far as the NFC North goes. It doesn't really affect the Lions too much. It doesn't really affect the Packers too much. The only piece of Packers news that I would probably throw into this is the restructuring of the Bakhtiari contract to maybe free up some money to go after J.J. Watt. But the market for J.J. Watt is so significantly bigger than I think anybody could have anticipated that just to sort of pull them into the favorite, odds-on favorite as the Packers just because of Wisconsin would be reading the room a little too early. So that's going to do it for this episode, this week's episode of Weekly North News. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.